Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering human creativity. I am Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Jerry Tietz, who serves as Director of Concert Management at Northwestern University's Bienen School of Music. Jerry, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here, Aaron. Thanks.
So I'm so excited to talk to you for a host of levels. Obviously, Northwestern is a fantastic institution, one of our great partners, creative partners here at Arts Engines. And you have this role as Director of Concert Management. So first, I thought for our audience, let's cover what does a Director of Concert Management do? What falls under your purview?
Sure. In the simplest way, if it happens in any of our 5 performance venues, it's managed through my office. So that means managing the schedules, getting things into the schedules for our venues, but then also supporting them in terms of backstage crew, technical, audio, recording, front of house, marketing and promotion for our events so that we can have an audience enjoy the talent of our students and faculty, and then selling all of the tickets. So in a way, it's a bit like running a performing arts center within a school of music, which itself is within a large research institution like Northwestern. So I often see myself on the execution end of things. We have our own, the school has its own priorities. Faculty and students are constantly brimming with ideas and projects. And I see my role as aiding and abetting, and meeting with them and sort of asking the questions, what are we going to need to pull this off? And how can we help you do your best work with a little bit of planning? Because in my experience, you can have a great idea and envision the concert that you see in your mind, but if you don't have a grasp of just some basic logistical understandings of what will it take to achieve your vision, then often it doesn't happen, or at least doesn't happen as well as it could. So I'm regularly in touch with conducting faculty and academic faculty for lectures, and our own students, just to figure out what is it that you want to do, what is achieving that thing going to take, and how can we help?
That is awesome. And I love it because it's literally the description, if you will, of our show. In other words, that you are the engine that is enabling all of these, of course, amazing performances to take place. And I think oftentimes so many people, especially people outside the field, don't realize that work and processes. And so one of my questions then, kind of following up on that, is especially for students, right? So much of what you're talking about are these skill sets that are required beyond just one's art making, beyond what one can accomplish in the practice room, et cetera. And so just wondering, where do you think those skill sets fall in terms of importance for students? Where do you think students are at? So just kind of these additional skill sets for them. You have thoughts about that?
Well, it's becoming increasingly critical that students do develop some baseline familiarity and skills on the administrative side of things. It wasn't all that long ago that if you were in a conservatory setting like the Bienen School, and you were a performance major, your number one task was learn your craft. Learn to play your instrument as best you can, and then you hit the young artist audition circuit or the competition circuit, and there was just sort of this understood path that students would take, and it was just all about play your instrument as best you can. And recently, I think there's been a real increase and rise and familiarity among students that entrepreneurialism is something that they might choose or even need to look into further. There are students trying to walk their own path, one that doesn't necessarily fall within the more narrow confines of how to begin a career as a musician once you've left school. But that takes an understanding. It takes an understanding of self-promotion. It takes an understanding often in fundraising and finding sponsors and support. Once you have a concert going on, how are you going to ensure that the other critical half of that endeavor is there, which is the audience? And how do you make that sustainable? How do you make something that is lucrative and going to allow you to pay the bills? So there are a number of skills that just are so far outside of how well am I playing my instrument that students these days need to be equipped with. And I think with the rise of some of these entrepreneurial programs, they're getting a sense of that, but it's often about what do I need to do in order to help self-promote myself, help put the art I want to make out into the world. But as you know, there are many of us arts administrators who exist to help others put their art out into the world. And what I'm surprised by, and maybe shouldn't be, is that I recognize myself in so many of these students because I see them as individuals who want to connect, they want to bring projects together, they want to bring them to fruition. And it's not as much about, I want to be center stage, I want the limelight. What they're trying to do is help make something happen. And I almost want to shake them by the shoulders and say, you understand you're an arts administrator. You haven't gotten there yet. And that's what it took for me, is for someone to just explain to me and ask, have you ever considered this? And at the time I think I was a fourth year senior in my undergrad. And I said, I don't even know what those words mean. And she took me under her wing and then began my process of understanding that you can make a career out of this and that it can be just as artistically gratifying as any of the music making that I'd made as a student.
Absolutely. And as you look at it from the vantage point that you're at, is there a sense that you have kind of among students in general of where the biggest gap is? In other words, from where they are currently with their skill sets versus where, this is where you need to be out in the professional world. Is there any area that you think this is one of the key areas we should all be really focused on, because it seems like this is often where the biggest gap is?
Mm-hmm. I would say it falls into two categories. One is an ability to envision the ultimate goal, and then in the short term, what is it going to take? I need a venue, I need equipment, I need the proper expertise and support to help me execute this thing. And so that's narrowly tailored to how do I put on the show that I want to put on. And then if we take a step back, okay, well, what happens after that show? Surely there's going to be another one. Are you going to try to tour that and be presented in multiple locations? Are you already working on the next project? And so finding a way to sort of budget both your time and but also your resources, and figuring out what will it take to execute this? Who do I need on my side? Who do I need in the room with me? And that's often what I find is the first point in which students get tripped up. They can often have a great idea for a great concert. Sometimes they'll seek me out, say, can we have a meeting and talk about what I'd like to execute? And what they're talking about, though, is the performance, and very rarely what we'll need to do, all of the steps between today and opening night, as it were. And so I often encourage them to think, who is it that you need in the room with you as you're having these discussions? As you're envisioning what the concert's going to be, who is it that can join you in asking some of those unknown unknowns from your perspective? Someone with a bit of background and expertise, whether it's on the the stage management side, or maybe on the licensing side if necessary, or the marketing side. Find those people, seek them out, enlist them in support of your thing, and put them in the room with you, because that's how you can't get to answers and solutions until you begin asking the right questions. And very often they just start with the idea for the performance in mind, and then just sort of start walking toward it in a way that doesn't have a whole lot of direction. So I think helping students understand there are many, many questions that need to be asked and answered in order to achieve and get to where you want to be. Who are the people in your universe that you can bring into the planning on that to help you achieve it?
Totally. Well, unfortunately, we are just about out of time, but I always like to ask of all my guests, this type of work, and especially with the breadth that you have to cover, there's got to be some tough days or days when it seems some challenges arise that may not even be able to be overcome. Just as a leader, do you have any mechanisms or a strategy that you would share with people? Here's a best practice of something I do in the toughest times.
I think that there can be a tendency when things get either you're just exhausted after a long period or maybe just a string of some frustrating things. There's a very human tendency to retreat, to start closing your door, not answering the phone when it rings, and just look inward. And I would just encourage everyone to always try to remain accessible and approachable, because I find that it's often just in conversations with people, it's talking things out and then being transparent. There will be some opportunities that I have to decide, just given prioritizations, resources, that this isn't something that we can achieve now. But rather than just ignoring or dismissing or waving people off, it's about making that evaluation. If the determination is this isn't something we can move forward with now, be upfront and transparent about that. The person on the other end will, in my experience, always appreciate that I've actually given it the thought and I'm taking the time to express why it is this isn't something that can happen right now, but let's look at when it could. That's something that I've seen happen where people can just kind of go into a shell, and then the response from everyone else is, well, now they're not helping. Maybe they either don't want to or they can't. For me, I always want to get to yes, but if it can't be done now, I'll be transparent and upfront about that.
Jerry Tietz, you truly are one of the arts engines who is powering human creativity in our world. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Pleasure, Aaron. Thanks for having me.